Hi, and welcome to November 2022 Patreon rewards video. All right, so let's get to it. Really, I can't actually share the project that I have been working on all month, but I can share the projects that I have worked on before that I totally forgot to do, and some of the sketches that I did today, this month, especially on my zoo trips. So, speaking of, here's the zoo trip page. So some of this art. Here's the actual page here. Some of this art was already in the previous time from the last zoo trip. This sketch here, but some of this was from the Hymns on Paradise, Walking on Water that I shared last month. These are some of the sketches and the clothing that I was using to sketch. But then I went to the zoo a couple of weeks ago with my friends from work. And this time we hung out at the kangaroo area, the Australian area, the kangaroo area. There was some koalas there, but they were asleep. We couldn't even see them. There was some, yeah, lots of different, not a lot, but some Komodo dragons. That's what I was going to. So there was some Komodo dragons. I didn't draw them, but I did draw the kangaroos and the wallabies. So one of the things that I did this month, there's like a $5 a Five Below store, and there was a pack of these pens for $5. There was two for $5, and there are these fountain pens. I don't know if you could see that there. So it's this fountain pen here like this, and it comes with ink in here like that. And I've always been curious about using fountain pens. I've never wanted to spend the money on something expensive, but since it was two fountain pens for $5, I figured I'd give it a shot to see what it would be like to have a fountain pen and draw with a fountain pen. This is not waterproof ink. If you wet it, it will smear, which is good if you want to smear the ink with water. For like shadow effects and stuff like that. So I'll show you next month some of that. But so this is my first time using this fountain pen, and it was really tricky. The fountain pen doesn't have the thing that I like about using, say, a ballpoint pen, a regular Bic ballpoint pen, is that you can draw lightly and then draw harder and get a darker line. With a fountain pen, not so much. With a fountain pen, if you draw lightly, you get a thinner line, but the ink is still heavy. And then when you press harder, you get a thicker line. If you if you go fast, you get a thinner line that seems a little bit lighter like this, but if you go too fast, it doesn't actually leave a mark. Like right here, I lose some ink. It doesn't leave the mark that I want. So getting used to drawing with this fountain pen was part of the challenge of drawing at the zoo this time around, because I really wanted to only use the fountain pen. And I don't love it. I don't love it. I thought it was all right. So here I'm going. Here's the here's the wallabies. The wallabies were really cute. They're like kangaroos, only like plush doll versions of kangaroos, which is very funny. Like they look so much more cuddly and soft and fat and fluffy, but they're still like kangaroos. Like they're like little mini plush dolls of kangaroos. And trying to capture that kind of plush doll look was part of the fun of trying to draw the wallabies. So, and within the wallaby area, there were these giant birds with these crazy, like, I think they were called rhino birds or rhino something, I forgot, because of this giant tusk that looked like it was coming out of the beak. So that was fun. But here's, so again, all of this was using the fountain pen. Some of these effects, as I went, I started getting a little bit more used to drawing with the fountain pen. I started realizing how I had to just kind of go in and be very confident, and with it, and you can get some really interesting effects with it. Using the fountain pen felt a little bit like using a gel pen. It did feel a little bit, and I'm not a fan of using gel pens. So again, will I stick with fountain pens? I don't know. I'll think about it. Maybe it's just this particular fountain pen and I may like a different type in the future, but that so far is my verdict on using fountain pens to sketch, especially like zoo animals and things like that. So yeah. Oh, duh. Okay, so here's I thought I was going to share this next month, but I think so here I used a fountain pen. I went to the park and I had my fountain pen and I still want to practice and I still wanted to play with it, so I drew a tree. And then I worked out where the shadow areas were and where they were going to be. And then once I drew all the lines, I went in with my brush, my water brush, and then I smeared the lines. And what ended up happening was it picked the ink smeared, and it made these effects. So right here, I just put the water pen, the water, and it just activated the ink, and it just smeared the ink all over in order to make this shadow effect. So that's something that's really cool that I do like about using a fountain pen, is that you can do this sort of thing. Yeah, so like maybe next time I'll do something like draw these lines like this, and then smear it, and then get a more dark kind of look to the shadows. So I still need to play around a little bit more with the fountain pen and how you can mess around and smear the ink. Yeah, and I think that if I was to use brown ink, just to give it that look of like old ink. I don't know. Well, I'll think about it. We'll see. Okay. This month's postcard. So this is this month's postcard. I'm actually very happy with the way it turned out. Again, I'm doing these really cartoony things now, and I'm trying to color it as if it was just a marker pen. I was using marker, giving it like a marker effect ish, but it's still watercolor. But I'm trying to just do very, very simple, not too modeled. In marker, you can model to a certain extent. So I wanted to keep it simple, but slightly modeled, but at the same time, just kind of very simple, light and dark. So here's this month's postcard. Like I said, I'm happy with the way that it turned out. I'm going to release a video talking about how I did it. And yeah, I think I'm beginning to get used to the process. I think I'm starting to figure out a process that I like to get this kind of effect. I'm going to keep doing it because I really enjoy it. I really have fun doing that. So who won this month's postcard? Well, this month I got a new patron, and that patron actually ended up winning this postcard. it was, well, it's kind of for two people actually, because it's a it's a person that I actually know, and so Paul and Ruthie Nowak. So I'm coaching Ruthie, but Paul, it's his daughter. So Paul is the patron. So Paul and Ruthie ended up winning this postcard. So congratulations, Paul and Ruthie. I will be sending this postcard to you. And I haven't even signed it. I forgot. So I'm going to have to sign it here. All right. So that's that. Okay. So one of the projects that I've been working on, that I was working on 2 or 3 months ago, that I wasn't able to talk about or release, was released, and then it was taken down, and then it was put up again. It was taken down, and like so. But I keep I'm able to share it because it's been out in public. It's already been shown, even though it has been taken down. I'm going to have to put it up on my own Instagram because it's very annoying that it just keeps disappearing from the place that I originally did it for. So and it's a book, and it's an image from hymns in Paradise again. So I'm going to talk a little bit about hymns in Paradise. So bear with me because this is going to be long. So if all you want to do is find out like all the images that you're getting that I'm going to show you, and then you can stop the video, because I'm going to go deep into this painting or this image, because the image there's a lot to it. So if you thought that last image of I went on too long with the Hymns in Paradise image last month, this is going to be even worse, right? So let me just and then I'm gonna introduce you to what Hymns in Paradise is to begin with. So here we go. So this image is from Hymns on Paradise. What is Hymns on Paradise? Hymns on Paradise is this book here, Hymns on Paradise, okay, by Saint Ephrem the Syrian, who died in 373. He was, so AD, right? So he's one of the early church fathers, and he's what is called a doctor of the church in the Latin Rite. In Roman Catholicism. What a doctor of the church means is not that you get a doctorate or a professorship or whatever it is, that you don't go into a specific schooling and a degree and then you get a doctorate. That's not what it means. When the Roman Catholic Church designates a person as a doctor of the church, it just basically means that their writing is so profound, theologically profound, that that it behooves the faithful, the laity, and everybody who is Catholic, to read the writings, because it will blow your mind, and it'll send you into theological depths that you wouldn't have otherwise. Right? That's the entire point. Like when you have when you're considered a doctor of the church, it's a big highlight on the person to say this guy is a person, or this woman is a person worth reading their work, so that you can go deeper into the faith. Other doctors of the church, besides Saint Ephrem, are people like Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint Therese of Lisieux. We've got Saint Augustine, Thomas Aquinas. We have the recently announced newest doctor of the church, which is Saint Irenaeus. So there's like a lot of doctors of the church that the church recommends to read in order to really go in depth and really understand, because a lot of the time we have very childish notions of what our faith is. We think that heaven is a place where people are hanging out with harps and wings and with the angels and the clouds. We think that God is some white guy with a beard. We think that that hell is a bunch of places where a bunch of guys in leotards with pitchforks are poking you in the butt and the fire, stuff like that. Like that. That's the childish view that a lot of people tend to have about Catholicism, Christianity. Mostly because of the imagery, because the imagery is meant to be a visualization of things that that have no materiality, and so they make a material thing, and then people think that it's what's depicted on the pictures, which the pictures are not meant to be taken literally. But so what are hymns on paradise? All right, so hymns on paradise. So we've got some, especially in the West, in the Christian West, we have two big names in poetry when it comes to spiritual things, or Christian things. We have Milton and we have Dante Alighieri. So Milton writes about the devil and hell and the fall of the angels and all that stuff. And the Divine Comedy with Dante Alighieri, he writes about the Inferno, he writes about Purgatorio, and then he writes about paradise, right? Paradiso, and he travels through these things, these places. And both Milton and Dante are extremely influential when it comes to the poetry and the imagery and the ideas that we have about Christianity. Milton isn't Roman Catholic, so there are things in Milton that are But the thing is that Milton is very, very culturally influential because of what he wrote, and it affects people's perceptions of these things. The Divine Comedy is another very profound work, and the Divine Comedy has got a very special place, especially in my wife's heart. So much so because she loves it so much, like she absolutely adores it. So much so that our firstborn son's named Dante after Dante Alighieri, which is crazy. That's how much she loves the Divine Comedy. And so the thing about the Divine Comedy is that it's extremely profound in the way that it talks about love, right? And that's the ultimate theme of the poem. The poem is about love. Because Dante came from a courtly love tradition in the High Middle Ages, right at the point of the transition between more of the modern the modern view of more materialist scientific world and the medieval spiritual world, right? So he's kind of like right in between. But he was romantic and he spoke about love, and so the Inferno is about misplaced love. What happens when you put your love in the wrong things? Purgatorio is where you learn to love. So Purgatorio is about learning to let go of the messed up love and learning to love correctly, right? So there's a transitional phase, and then the Paradiso is proper love. It's how you truly love, right? That's the gist of the Divine Comedy. And the thing about the Divine Comedy is that it's famous for the Inferno most of all, right? I've I've gone through the Divine Comedy once already. I'm going through it again. I'm Purgatorio right now, and I've actually discovered that I deeply, profoundly love Purgatorio more than any of the two other books. But one of the flaws in Dante's poem, I think, is that in spite of the fact that the subject matter and what he writes about is beautiful, his version of paradise is extremely dull. People tend to zone out and not want to read Paradise because it comes across as not very dramatic, right? Like there's a loss of drama when you get to Paradise that makes it kind of dull, and it just becomes a big theological conversation in a way that's not as compelling as the other two stages. This is so these Milton and Dante are extremely influential. The other thing about Dante is this. Dante was a person who was deeply stuck in the secular. By secular, I just mean that he was very political. Like the things that he wrote about had a lot. He knew more. He knew a lot about theology, which you can read in the poem. It's extremely theologically rich. But he was also had his head in worldly political stuff, and he was no saint. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say is that he was no saint, and the entire point of the poem is that he wasn't a saint, and he was in a place where he needed to try to get out of the place where he was because he wasn't sanctified and he wasn't there where he needed to be. And the thing about that is that when and that is reflected in his writing on Paradise, because he doesn't have a foot in paradise already on earth, his paradise doesn't ring as true as it could. Enter Ephrem the Syrian. Ephrem the Syrian, Saint Ephrem the Syrian, is a saint. Okay, so that means that when the fact that he's got a saint in front of his name means that he's considered extremely holy, and he did have a foot in paradise already. That's the entire point. The entire point is that he's writing a poem. He's writing hymns from the perspective of someone who's already got a foot in the door. So he's already experiencing paradise even while he's still alive, because that's the point. And then I think I'm going to get into it a little bit later, but that's the thing. So St. Ephrem is not as well known in the West. Why? Because his poem, his hymns weren't translated into Latin, and then from Latin into vernacular languages. They just weren't. It's not that. Well, it's not quite true. Some of it was they were translated into Latin because, like Saint Augustine and Saint Jerome and a lot of other writers read the hymns and knew the hymns, but they weren't as highly distributed within the West as some of the writings of other fathers. And most definitely, they weren't distributed among the Western Catholics in the same way that that the Divine Comedy and Milton's Paradise Lost was. And so, because of that, there's this perception or there's this bias that makes it seem that he's not as important, except that Milton and Dante are doctors of the church, right? So it's only this book is fairly new. It's a fairly new translation. It's very recent, and it's only now kind of being distributed. Now people are talking a little bit more about Saint Ephrem, but he's been around forever. He's been around longer than Milton, longer than Dante, and he actually deserves to be put, if anything, if not on par, but above, right? Because, like I said, he's a doctor of the church, which makes no sense for Western Catholics not to know this, the hymns. And so this is why I'm doing the images. This is one of the reasons why I think he's important. And because he's talking about paradise in a way that that Milton and Dante were unable to. By which I mean that Milton also wrote Paradise Found, and it's terrible and boring and nobody likes it, right? And in the same way that when you get to Paradiso, people tend to zone out on Dante. Saint Ephrem's book or poems are only paradise, right? They're only talking about paradise, and they're just as compelling when you read the hymns as the Divine Comedy's Inferno, right? This is and the irony is that the Inferno in the Divine Comedy is so popular, but that's not the destination. The destination is paradise, right? The destination for Christians is paradise. Why is paradise always written boring and terrible, but hell seems so interesting? It shouldn't be the other way around. So St. Ephrem writes about paradise in one of the most compelling ways I've ever read anybody, and it's very, very exciting. So, and this affects your everyday life when you read this stuff, right? Because it's a positive, hopeful thing, and it's also still dramatic and deep and profound. Okay, so that's the introduction to hymns. Hymns on St. Ephrem and the Syrians, hymns on paradise. So now I'm going to talk about the image that I did, the very first image that I did for hymns. And so the idea was that I'm supposed to draw a hymn, an image for every hymn. There's, I believe, 25 hymns. Okay. So that means I have 25 drawings to do. This was the first one. I didn't realize that I was gonna do all 25 hymns. So I ended up just picking one that I thought would make a good image. So this is the very first image I did. I picked one that I thought would make a good image. I had to read the hymns in paradise like a couple of times just to try to find a good one that really like made me said that, okay, this one kind of almost sums up sort of the hymns. I don't know, like something like that. So the hymns on paradise are multiple hymns, but they tend to tell a story all at once, which is interesting. So it tells a full story, but they're also self-contained. And this is hymn 12. Verse 17. And the thing about hymns on paradise is that it goes, it jumps around a lot through time and space, and connects life and paradise all together, and it connects Genesis to Revelation. A lot of the time, and it's all incorporated into all the biblical texts and all the biblical stories. It's fractal, and so it talks about it's very, very profoundly connected. Like it talks about the connection of everything in an amazing way. That's why it's like nothing you've ever read or understood in Christian theological thought. So this hymn right here says this: "For God would not grant him the crown without some effort." And so he's talking about Adam here. So Adam, he would not grant Adam the crown of glory, without some effort. He placed two crowns for Adam, for which he was to strive. So of course the crowns being a reward, right? Two trees to provide crowns if he were victorious. If only he had conquered just for a moment, he would have eaten from the one and lived, eaten the other and gained knowledge. His life would have been protected from harm, and his wisdom would have been unshakable. So that's the hymn. That's the one verse of hymn 12 that I decided to take out. So remember, there's a lot of verses. This is only one verse out of lots of verses in this particular hymn. So the idea is here that, and this is a really interesting and profound idea that was actually picked up by the Franciscans with Saint Bonaventure, but it was an idea that existed in the fathers, and that is that by the fathers I mean the fathers of the church, the first 300 years of the church. And St. Ephrem being one of those people from the first 300 years. He's a third generation Christian. And so the idea was that Adam and Eve had a choice of eating the fruit. So in this image, what I did was I made, so often an apple is used to represent the fruit. One of the reasons why apple is used to represent fruit is because in the language in older English, I think, I'm not 100% sure. This is what I've heard. I didn't check this. I didn't verify this, but I heard that in English, in Old English or in older versions of English, the word apple just meant fruit. It didn't mean a specific type of fruit like we do now, that an apple is that particular fruit. Apple just meant fruit in general, like the general idea of fruit. It was fruit and apple were synonymous. So often now apple is represented, but so that's one of the reasons. But I didn't want to use an apple because the idea is not that it's a specific fruit, right? So I decided to just create a fake fruit, and this fake fruit is like a little mini sun, right? So inside the shape here, it's a circle, so it's a unified form. So I chose a circle because it's a perfect shape, right? And then and inside is a seed. So the black is the seed, and then I have these little lines that radiate from the seed, which is like the light of knowledge, right? So those are what the little lines are. So that's what the fruit. The reason why I chose to make this circular fruit with a seed inside and the light radiating from it to represent knowledge. So the idea being that the test was, will Adam and Eve obey? And the reason why God, the conjecture or the notion here So that's part of the test, so that you could win the crown of passing that test. Another thing is that God said that you will surely die if you eat the fruit. The idea, one idea of that being that because the fruit either wasn't ripe, or because the Adam and Eve, the humans weren't able to assimilate the fruit yet, so they weren't ripe, right? So they weren't ready to consume, and they weren't, or the fruit wasn't ripe yet. So the idea was, don't eat this. I'm trying to protect you from this for now. So the idea was that eventually, and you could read this in Ephrem the Syrian, they would be allowed to eat the fruit. And when they were ready, maybe if they had passed the test, they would have been shown to be mature enough to be able to handle eating the fruit. Okay. And then so if they had eaten the fruit with permission, they would have eaten the fruit, and then they would have learned about good and evil from a point of view of being pure and good. In the same way that if you are a healthy person and then you're taught about sickness, you understand sickness from the point of view of health, right? So you're not sick. You are learning about sickness while being healthy. But there's the other way of learning about sickness. You are sick, and so you learn what your sickness is by being sick, right? So that's what ended up happening because they ate the fruit. They learned about good and evil from the point of view of being sick, as opposed to what they were supposed to do, which was learn to eat learn about sickness from the point of view from the position of being healthy. And so because they ate the fruit, they were not allowed to walk up Mount Paradise. So Paradise is a mountain. I think I said that in the last video, that Paradise is a mountain. There's a description of Paradise where the waters of the world, four rivers flow from Paradise. The four rivers being the four corners of the earth, the waters coming from Paradise to all the earth. There's a passage in St. Ephrem that the waters come down onto the earth and get polluted once they get into the earth, because the earth has been polluted by the sin of Adam. And so the waters get polluted. They get tainted as they touch earth, as they touch the material plane. I don't know, like whatever you want to call it. But water, if it flows down, right? Therefore, Paradise is up, and the waters come from the peak of the mountain, and they flow down. Therefore, Paradise is a mountain. So one of the things that Saint Ephrem says is that the tree of knowledge was in a way a barrier or a gate that allowed you to go further up Mount Paradise. And on top of Mount Paradise, in the center of Mount Paradise, is the tree of life. So the idea being that had they eaten of the tree with permission properly, instead of doing it against God's warning, had they been obedient, not eaten it, then God would have allowed them to eat. They would have gotten the knowledge of good and evil, and then they would have been able to pass past the tree of Paradise. So what I've got here is the serpent, right? I put Adam on the right-hand side of the tree, and Eve on the left-hand side of the tree. So this is the right hand and the left hand imagery, which is if you want to know more about that, look at Jonathan Pageau's videos on the right hand and the left hand. And so I put her on the left, and then and the serpent is looking down at Eve here, and he's wrapped around the tree. There's the image is always, there's always like a lot of ancient images with the serpent wrapped around the tree. But in this case, I actually put like this kind of Lord of the Rings kind of Gates of Moria door within the tree. And that's just to symbolize the idea that then the tree would have opened, then they would have been able to walk up the mountain, right? This was just the way, the best way I could think to kind of make this kind of Minas Tirith, because that's the thing about paradise. J.R. Tolkien, being a Roman Catholic, he had this intuitive sense of this notion. So if you look at Minas Tirith in Lord of the Rings, it's shaped like paradise. And it's got gates. Boom, 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 boom. And at the very top we have what? The tree of Valinor, right? That's the tree of life, right? And you go up the mountain of paradise and it's all gated, right? So this the tree of knowledge is like one of the gates of Minas Tirith, where you're not allowed to go past that point, and then you go up higher and higher and higher. That it's a Minas Tirith is like a paradisal type of image of it's like a mini paradise icon, right? So that's kind of what I was doing here was that there's a gate there. They would have been allowed to pass. Here's the crown they would have won. That would have been the victory. And then they would have gotten to the greater crown and eaten of the fruit. So when you go up to the tree of paradise and eat of the fruit, you take the fruit and then you live forever. So because they fell, they weren't allowed to eat the fruit of the tree of life, which would have allowed them to eat to live forever. The idea being here that they had to be expelled from paradise, and then the story says that that Adam and Eve were banned from paradise, and there was an angel set in front of the gate to not allow them to enter paradise again. And some people have speculated that the part of the reason why that is because they would have been tempted to like jump the gate and go and eat of the fruit, but that would have frozen them in a fallen state and made them immortal. So that's the idea of the vampire, right? Where you are in a state of immortality, but as a monster, right? So you're living forever, but as a monster. So that's what was being prevented from happening. You can't eat of the fruit. Now that you've fallen, you're going to be stuck like that forever. So the idea being that Jesus came to fix that, to vaccinate. So there's another. So here's the thing. So the love of God, the idea in Saint Ephrem, in Hymns on Paradise, if you read it carefully and you're reading it all, and like I said, just read the hymns. They're just amazing. The idea being that the incarnation of Christ was going to happen anyway. No matter what, the plan was for God to incarnate. So he wasn't forced to incarnate because of Adam and Eve. He was going to just do it anyway. What he was forced to do was he was forced to die on a cross. But the idea was that Adam and Eve would be fruitful and multiply, and then Mary would give birth to Christ, and then by doing so, man would be divinized and unified with God, and so he would live among us as he would elevate humanity to a more divine place, and he would physically be with everybody, right? Like in love, like that was because he loved us so much. He wanted to be with us at that level, and lift us up. But Adam and Eve fell, so what ended up happening was that when the incarnation happened, he had to die and suffer in order to fix the problem. And so when you get baptized, it's like you get inoculated into the grace of God. So you're saved through the inoculation. And then the rest of the time, why do we always sin? If we were saved, why are we still sinning? Because we're being inoculated. We got inoculated, and now he's in us, working out, trying to get that sin out. And we have to work like we have to exercise. Like if we were to try to be healthy, and we take medicine or vitamins, and then we have to participate in our own health by exercising, by eating right. And if we don't do that, we will end up worse for wear, right? In the same way, the spiritual life is like that, where we do exercise, spiritual exercise, work with the health and the inoculation and the food and the health to make us more spiritually healthy, and bring us into paradise on earth while we're still alive, right? So we work with grace, with the will of God, do the will of God, and then we embody paradise, and we are actually literally bringing paradise on earth. We are participating in the paradise, right? So now if you go up here in the tree of life, I have a bunch of little circles here, and these little circles in the tree of life are the fruit of the tree of life. So you eat the tree and you live forever. You have eternal life when you eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Of life. And that fruit is Christ, right? That's the thing. So like if you look at other images, when you look at the crucifixion, you have a good thief and a bad thief, and then you have Christ on a tree. The tree is the tree of life. He is the fruit hanging there, and then the good thief and the bad thief, good and evil. The trees of good and evil, the branches of good and evil. So here we have the good thief, the bad thief, and the crucifixion in the middle, and then the tree of life here with the fruit, which is Christ. So that's the idea behind this image, and I deliberately made the fruit look like the Eucharist, because that's the fruit. This is my body, this is my blood. You eat the fruit. You eat the fruit of the sacrifice, like everybody in all of the Old Testament they would consume the sacrificial flesh of the sacrifice, especially in Passover, specifically in Passover. You consume the sacrifice. You assimilate the sacrifice. You offer it up, and then you assimilate it. That's the idea. So that's why I made the fruit look like a bunch of little Eucharists, because in Catholic worship we unite during the moment of consecration. You could say that time travel happens in a mystical way, where we are united in that moment of the sacrifice of Christ on the cross and the Last Supper together as one, right? And then we go back to that moment in time. We participate in that moment in time. That's what ritual does. It brings back that it brings that moment in time into actual space, and we participate in that moment in time, and then from that moment in time is given we are given the fruit of the tree of life, and so that's why the fruit of the tree is little circles, is little wafers that I put in here. And then there's the crown, of course, which is the crown is the prize. The tree of life is the prize. So that's the story behind the image, based on the theology of Saint Ephrem the Syrian on Hymns in Paradise. This is one of the reasons why I highly recommend Hymns on Paradise. It's extremely profound. You have a lot to think about. There is so much to this stuff that that makes you really go, okay, what's happening? What's going on? It makes you. It takes away the churchiness, the religious. It doesn't. There's this notion that there's religion and then there's living your life. No, that ritual and liturgy is somehow cold and religious, and it's not. That's not what it is. It's actually far more profound than that. And if you don't understand it, then you can't live it out. The idea being that the connection between you and paradise are one, right? So your very act, the very fact that you're walking, living, talking, speaking, and being with someone is paradise. You are manifesting paradise at all times. But you can't manifest paradise if you don't know what paradise is. And paradise is union with God. So there's a lot of other things that I'm going to be talking about with on Hymns on Paradise. In the next image that I have, there's going to be there's some very sexual language in it for a good reason. So because of this whole union, communion, connection, and life-giving thing, and to just make it superficial to just assume that liturgy and the rituals and the prayers are superficial in some way is to completely miss the point of all the depth that's going on. So again, just read the Hymns on Paradise, and then you'll really understand this stuff more profoundly. And I'm trying to make these images so that they mean something. And so I just explained what I mean by the image, so you can see that this isn't just a fun little image. There's a lot to this. Okay, so that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've gotten something out of this, and I will talk to you next time. All right, bye.